thank you for the introduction. Yes, thank you, spring, finally here. I know I've been waiting a long time, and thanks for the introduction. But yes, I've been working in Annapolis for over 20 years, so I'm very familiar with the Severn River. I'm very familiar with tree maintenance on the waterfront. So I'm not. I've seen several hurricanes, so I can see what damage they can do. Trees are magnificent. They're my passion. They're what I really strive for every day, and I think that this presentation will be somewhat eye-opening. I'd like to open up questions throughout the presentation to kind of keep things going, so I'm not just sitting. So if you have a question, probably someone behind you has a question, and the same question, and I'll answer it that way. At the end, I brought a bunch of literature for you guys to have. Check it out. There's all sorts of interesting things, facts, stuff we do, but also some things that will help you with your trees, particular young trees. We can't have a beautiful 200-year-old oak tree if we don't start with a young tree. So I'm going to start off with a question, see if you can answer it. Who can tell me the best time to plant a tree? Fall. Fall. Anybody else is wrong?
Anytime.
Anytime?
10 years ago.
Thank you. 20 years ago is even better. So 20 years ago, what's the second best time? Right now, right? So we can't get that 200-year-old tree unless we start with a young tree. A lot of people call in arborists because they have a big, beautiful tree. I look at it as a complete tree doctor and some things we need to do with young trees. And I try to relate trees to people because people can relate to that. So basically, anybody has kids? Anybody have kids? You just send them off to the world? Little ones right there? Just send them off to college right out of the womb? No, you got to nurture them. You got to take care of them. You got to make sure that they're able to get out in the real world. And that starts with young trees, starting them off young, getting them developed, getting them through the college years, right, which is the expensive part, and then off to being some of the older mature trees. As the older trees age, if we do the right things while they're young, we don't have as many problems with them. We don't have structural failures. We don't have a lot of issues that we do if we take care of them when they're young. So I'm going to preach that. There's a lot of talk in here about pruning, maintenance. I'm seeing a lot of work out there, both good and bad. I think there's a lot of rumors out there about trees, so I'd like to kind of squash those in terms of if you got questions about copper nails killing trees. They don't kill trees. There's all sorts of rumors out there, so if you have some, let me know. So we'll just get started into it. Again, if you have questions, let's hit it. So a little bit about Bartlet Tree Experts. They're established in 1907. I did not start Bartlet Tree Experts. I'm a lot younger than that. Mr. Bartlett is third generation. He's out of Stamford, Connecticut. His grandfather started the company back in 1907. We are the world leader in residential tree care maintenance. So we are international. We're in England, Ireland, British Columbia. I'm ready to start the Hawaii office, so whenever that gets started, we can do that. We are scientifically based. So whenever recommendations come in, if I'm going to recommend something to you, it's got to pass the test at our lab. We have about 6 PhDs, and all these nerds do is deal with tree stuff. So chemicals and products that you guys can buy off the shelf, I can't provide those to you because it's got to pass our test. It's got to be it's got to be safe for our people. It's got to be safe for you and your pets, and then also it's got to work. So the agriculture department and all the chemicals that are out there, it is a huge multi-billion-dollar business, and we make sure that it goes through our rigorous testing before it gets out to you. And when you're talking about we have about over 2,500 employees, over 200 offices, so we're doing a lot of work on people's property. We want to make sure that we're providing the best service. Again, a research facility, 200-acre, it's unbelievable. It's a world-class facility down in North Carolina. I get the joy of going down there every once in a while to see some of the research. So they're basically doing things to trees that we normally wouldn't do. They test different cable systems. They'll do the topping of trees and see how they react. So it's a testing place for them so that they can give us information so that we can give you information, our clients. As for Bartlett here, it's been an animal cutting since the 1950s. I came over from Howard County with another company, and I've been in here for 20 years. So it's a good established company. It is family owned and operated. We look at it as we kind of have a local presence with a global touch. So I have all the support that I need globally, but I hire locally. Obviously I work locally, my family's local. So just a little bit about that. About me, so board certified master arborist. There's probably, 150, I guess, worldwide, so it's not a whole lot. It's a pretty vigorous test that you've got to take a couple hours to basically understand what you're talking about. Maryland Licensed Tree Expert is really important. I could be a board certified master arborist. I could be the greatest arborist in the world, but I cannot make recommendations in the state of Maryland without being a Maryland Licensed Tree Expert. So if you're getting advice from anybody, make sure they're a Maryland Licensed Tree Expert. It means two things. One, it means that they've at least taken some level of exam and know what they're talking about. Two, it means they're insured. So in order to have that license, you got to be insured. You can get on DNR and find out any people that are Maryland Licensed Tree Experts. So very important, and I love that Maryland does that. You go to Pennsylvania, anybody can practice arboriculture in Pennsylvania. So you tomorrow move up to Pennsylvania, you know nothing about trees. At least you know that some people, if they have that license, they know what they're talking about. I'm a Maryland pesticide applicator. Went through that test, so I know all about that. Been in Arizona for 20 years, and I'm recently track certified. That's tree risk assessment qualification. That's a 2-day course in which I basically study trees, failures of trees, and basically it's a complicated way of talking with you about what the risk is with trees. The way that I look at it is if a tree falls in the woods, does it make any noise? If a tree falls, if it falls on your house, it makes a lot of noise, you're going to know about it. So tree risk is all about targets. What part of the tree can hit somebody, can hurt somebody. When they come down, they cause a lot of damage. Someone gave me an article of a massive 200-year-old tree that destroyed a house, and they can cause a lot of damage. So you just got to understand the risk associated with that. You've got branch, stems, and roots. All three of those can cause issues. And the probability of it. I'm almost a lawyer, insurance. I think I've been a divorce guy before to try and keep the tree, take the tree down. So I kind of do it all. Psychologist, I do it all. Hug trees. So that's about me. So I'm here to talk a little bit about critical area. Can anybody tell me why is the critical area important? You guys are Seven River Association. You guys answer.
Filters the water.
Filters the water. What else?
Minimize erosion.
Minimize erosion, right? So what happens when we develop and we don't take care of that buffer? Erosion fills up the water. What happens? Aquatic plants die. We completely change the environment in which our bay. We've done a really crummy job over the past, and we're turning that around. We've had some really great improvements over the last decade, and I hope we continue to do that. Trees are a critical part of that. And the reality is that trees and people want waterfront, and that's just the way it is, and we need to work with that. So part of my job is to find that balance of the waterfront lifestyle with trees, and I think we can do that. I think we've got proven facts that keeping trees around. I mean, you guys have seen some of the slopes on the Severn River. You don't want your house falling into the Severn River. So a lot of practices that happened a long time ago, we can't take that back. We can just continue to work and improve on what we're dealing with. The 2 points I want to get across at the end of this presentation is that no management is not management, it's neglect. So because you're on the water, you just say, I see green, I see everything's lovely, I'm not going to touch it. That's not management. You're going to have problems. You're going to have issues with invasive species. You're going to have problems with trees falling over. So you got to make sure that you're doing some level of management in the buffer. A lot of people are afraid to work in the buffer, and that's really a bad misnomer. We should not be concerned about taking care of trees in the buffer. That either means taking care of them, planting them, the right trees in there is really, really important. We're going to get into invasive species. Invasive species is a huge problem around, and that's where we get into point 2. Not all green is good green, okay? So having an expert, having someone educating yourselves. The Maryland Extension Service is a great research. Doesn't have to be a contractor, but you need to understand what's in your buffer, what's growing back there, what's good, what's bad, and trying to make sure that we get rid of the bad, bring in the good. But
Define buffer and critical area.
what's that?
Define the difference.
Yes, and we're going to get into a little bit of that too as well. But yes, there's critical area and then there's buffer. Who can tell me the difference?
1,000 feet.
Very good. 100 feet and 1,000 feet. Can anybody tell me what you can do in the 100-foot buffer? Can you remove poison ivy in the 100-foot buffer? No, not without a permit. So, and does anybody know, is that a straight line? Who can tell me what a 100-foot buffer is? From me to that wall is 100 feet. Is that necessarily the case?
From mean high water.
Mean high water? And what else?
It increases if it's on a steep slope.
Slopes. It can extend up to 200 feet based on how steep the slope is. So it slopes. Right. Yeah, exactly. So the county does have a web-based system that will tell you where that buffer is based on your map. So they have come a long way from that perspective. But it's really important to understand that. So the 100-foot buffer, vegetation, anything in that buffer you cannot touch without a vegetative management plan. The 1,000-foot, what we call a critical area, is more for development purposes. About, I think 6 or 7 years ago, it used to be the 1,000-foot buffer, it was all vegetation. That was insane. You know, you couldn't cut a dogwood down in front of, you know, at 1,000 feet out. So they adjusted that back because it just wasn't manageable.
What's that 100 feet and 1,000 feet?
What's that?
What, 100 feet and 1,000 feet for what?
Mean high tide.
Oh, okay.
Mean high tide, yeah. So 100-foot buffer, but that can extend to be 200 feet if you're on a steep slope, okay? That's just if we're on flat surface. The eastern shore is more of a flat surface. We've got slopes on the Severn River we got to deal with. So that's exactly what that means. The 1,000 feet is more for dealing with impervious surfaces, putting an addition on, building a house. Those are some of those restrictions. So those are the difference between the two. I'm going to deal more with the green side. I can't give you a lot of information on how to deal with putting on an addition or impervious surfaces. That gets into some engineering and a lot more complicated. So, yes?
So if I have a waterfront property, a very steep slope, so I would want to start down at the river and project up, and then from there come in 100 or possibly 200 feet.
It could be. It's all going to vary. It depends on the grade of that slope. So I can't give you a straight answer. I know that's going to be more than 100 if you have any slope at all. So you just got to understand that I go to the county. I refer to the county on any time that I deal with doing vegetative management. Inside that, I invite them out. I just want to make sure you guys understand that the county is here to help you. They are not the enemy, okay? The enemy is the violation side. You kind of have the tree police who put you to jail, and they got the proactive guys. And the proactive guys, Jim Johnson, Jennifer Carrier, Bud Reeves, Nathan Markline, they are a team. I use them as part of my team to come in and make recommendations. So it's really important to understand that they are there to help you. They are a resource. You know, your taxpayers are paying for them to help you. So look at them as the good guys and not the enemy. It's really important to understand that I work with them on a regular basis. So we're getting into the critical area management. We're talking about evaluation. So just like anything with your doctor, before you go in and start telling the doctor what to do, you got to evaluate what you have. So if I get called on a property, the first thing I'm going to do, I look at safety. What are some things that could cause harm to you, could cause harm to your property, whether that be your house, whether that be your slope. If a tree fails on a slope, it exposes the soil. It causes way more problems than just removing trees. So I look at risk trees. That's the first thing I do is safety. Dead trees, we'll get into that. I've got some different theories on dead trees that we'll talk a little bit about. I think in the right space, dead trees are important. They're important for wildlife. I find that they don't fall over as much because they don't have the loads to them. So having a dead tree, as long as it's not a liability, and again, we get into we're a litigious society. So liability is if you have a dead tree and you're neglecting to take it down and it falls over and lands on your neighbor's property, causes damage, you could be liable for that. But dead trees in the woods at the right setting are actually pretty good, and we need to encourage them. Invasive species, we're going to get some photos of that. That's a major problem coming. Invasive species are basically species that outgrow our native species. The way that I look at it is if the first things that are greening up now on your property, if it's kind of a shrub or on the edge, it's invasive. Most invasive species leaf first. They don't allow our native vegetation to grow, and they hold on to the leaves longer into the winter. Okay, so that's a major problem because if our native plants can't get the sunlight in early spring, they die. And that's where invasives go up. Kudzu, mile-a-minute vine, multiflora rose, all those things. So, what's that?
English ivy.
English ivy,
Japanese honeysuckle.
yes, but English ivy, we could talk a little bit about it. It is invasive, but I don't mind it in certain areas, right? So it's all about and define invasive. So a lot of people don't want non-native trees. I'm a big fan of, at some point in our history, all the trees were native, right? So native just means the right tree in the right location, okay? And that it doesn't spread prolifically and become a monoculture. So invasive species, undesirable trees. Sometimes we need to remove undesirable trees to maybe promote a desirable tree. And what I mean by that is, let's say you have an ailanthus, or you have a pear tree, or you have another fast-growing black locust. Even though it's native, we have an oak behind it, and maybe we want to remove that tree to allow that oak to thrive and prosper, knowing that that oak's going to live for 200 years, where maybe that maple or that locust may only live for a few years. So it's really important to understand what type of trees you have and understand what their benefit is, what issues they may have. Again, not all green is good. It's important to understand the difference. Tree species, that's what we get into. Black locusts are a high-risk tree for failure. Oaks are not. Maples are high risk of splitting apart. So every tree has its own benefit. What I do when I talk to people is every tree has its mode of survival. We look at trees, and I talk to a lot of people, and they love the screening tree, they love this group of trees. Well, guess what they're doing? They're not playing nice together, okay? Each tree has its own agenda to try and kill its neighboring tree, okay? So that's called natural succession. So tulip poplars, everybody have tulip poplars? Are they fast growing or slow growing? Fast growing. So what's their mode of action? I'm going to outrace that oak to get up to that sun, and I'm going to be the dominant tall tree. And of course, what happens when you sacrifice health over speed? If you grow real fast and you don't have the health side of it, what happens? Do you make furniture out of poplar? Bad idea, right? Because it's fast growing. The faster they're growing the tree, the softer the wood, the faster it grows, the quicker it falls over. Oak trees, we make furniture out of oak. Why? It's dense, it's strong, right? So again, a very dense, strong wood. We also look at wounding. If a tulip poplar gets wounded, whether we cut off a limb, it breaks out, does it have a high probability of decaying or a slower probability of decaying? High, right. It's going to have decay in it pretty fast. Same thing with maples. They decay quicker. Whereas if you have an oak, I'm going to look at an oak and I'm going to treat an oak differently than I would a tulip poplar based on what the wound is and what the injury may be. So again, species specific is really, really important in terms of understanding what's going on your property. And then you have percentage of species composition. If you have an entire hillside of ash trees, is that a good thing or a bad thing? A bad thing, right? What happens? Does anybody know what the ash? Emerald ash borer. So in Asia, they ship crates over to Michigan, okay, in the Great Lakes. And those crates, and we've had situations where these insects have emerged out of people's furniture. They've emerged out of, yeah, absolutely, out of kids' play devices. There's a cage that they have, these sticks that they give to guinea pigs. And basically, they came from Asia, and these insects were emerging out of sticks. So how do you think our plants can tolerate insects from Asia? They can't, right, they can't. So the ash borer came into Michigan and it spread out and it killed every ash tree. Luckily, it only affects ash. So my question is, what's the next insect that's coming in? And that's the biggest concern. When you have all maple, we're in trouble. If we got all oak, we're in trouble. So that gets into monoculture, and that gets into planting a multitude of species of trees that can tolerate it. Are our temperatures, I don't want to get into the global warming thing, but are temperatures raising? Going up? Historically? Yes. Well, there's certain insects that can live in certain zones. And as that zone changes, that insect can now survive through a winter where it didn't before. So those insects are affecting a lot of trees. So we're trying to stay ahead of it. There's treatments for it. But the biggest treatment we can do is we can plant multiple types of species. Don't plant the row, leave the cypress, because we all know that that's going to be a problem. We love it because it's a lot of management and a lot of money, so keep planting the leaf and cypress. But if you want to be wise, plant a multitude of trees. So that's kind of my evaluation step. And that's what I do, and that's what you need to do on your property to evaluate what's going on out there, just like a doctor would.
What's the current status of bringing back the chestnut tree?
Bring back the chestnut tree. I know there's research on trying to bring that back, but that was a perfect example of everyone had chestnuts and it wiped it out. I've got a couple clients. There is a farm in Davidsonville that is trying to grow it. There's a lot of research going on with combining cultivars and trying to make that happen. That's a good thing and a bad thing. When you combine two species, you bring the good with one, but you can also bring insects that maybe be resistant to one species when we're combining them. So I'm not going to get a whole lot into the DNA, but I'm trying to deal with more the management side of things. So setting goals. Okay, so you have this property, you're on the Severn, you're not going to ignore it. Just like any management plan, you got a project, you need to basically start with a project. And again, I think a lot of people get very overwhelmed, either whether it be the cost, whether it be the time, but do a little something every day and it'll make a big difference. So looking at your project, you got to look at removals. Those are typically the most expensive you got to deal with. We do removals, but I also refer out removals. There's a lot of good removal companies, and I really don't want to be associated with removals just because I'm an arborist, so I like taking care of it. Pruning, invasive management, and plant healthcare. Again, look at your property, come up with a plan, come up with a budget. Do a little bit every year. Some people can, they can take care of everything all at once. Lots of times it's a little bit at a time, but understand it's never over. Just like your health, it's never over. There's constantly something that you need to do to make sure that you do it. So, get in the planning process, come up with a plan, and try and stick with it. So proper planning. All right, so here we're getting into the permit. So once you get a plan and you want to establish a plan, you got to find out where's your 100-foot buffer, where's your 1,000-foot buffer, what type of trees do you have in it, what concerns do you have, and again, getting in the county versus the city permits. I brought a bunch of permits with me. I'll put up on the counter for you that I brought with me. There's anybody in the city of Annapolis limits? That's an animal. The city is a lot more, I wouldn't say stringent, but their processes are a lot more detailed, especially trees in the historic district. I have to deal with that. But the city is it's a little bit more difficult to get things done, I would say, than it would be in the county. Not to say you can't go through the process. So we're looking at that, establishing the 100-foot buffer. Where is that on your property? That's really important to know, because what you can and cannot do in there. Will you remove 500,000 or 5,000 square feet? So if you're in the 1,000-foot buffer, there is a limit that people don't understand of 5,000 square feet, and that's a canopy coverage. So if you exceed that, the reason why they're doing that is they don't want people to buck the system by clearing an area over 5,000 square feet, then coming in and applying for a permit for building permits. Because the way that the mitigation works is completely different when you're building something rather than doing regular forest management. Forest management means basically taking a tree down that needs to come down, doing some pruning, doing some removal. So that's that 5,000 limit, and that's important to understand because if you break that, you're actually getting into grading permits. Grading permits are not inexpensive. The mitigation requirements on grading permits are 3, 4, 5 to 1 ratios. So you're allowed to do management, and we want to encourage people to do management. Don't be afraid to do it, but if you start getting into 4 or 5 big trees that need to come down, a light needs to kick on, and kicks on with me. Hey, why are we cutting all these trees down if they're in the same area? Are we really doing a good thing for our property? If you've got 5,000 square feet of trees that need to come down, someone was neglecting those trees if they're still alive. Okay? Will you do the work? Will you contract? Will you hire somebody to work? Certainly encourage you to hire somebody to do tree removal. I don't know if there's any emergency room doctors in here, but chainsaws and falling off ladders is not a good thing. I've got lots of clients that get seriously hurt, and it's a very, very dangerous job. You know, chippers, chainsaws, all these things are meant to get wood debris put away. It'll put a hurting on you. So one thing that we really emphasize with us is safety and how important that is. We've won several awards in our office here for our practice with safety. It's the first thing we do every day. We have a safety meeting before we go out because the job is very, very dangerous. So you get involved in that. Again, do your homework on that. Make sure that you hire a contractor that's a Maryland licensed tree expert. That means they have $1 million in liability. So if they drop that tree on your neighbor's house and they scoot back to West Virginia, guess who's holding the bill? You are for hiring them. Okay, so be very careful who you hire. Make sure they're licensed. Make sure they're insured. Because guess insurance companies, they're not going after him who's got $100 in the bank, right? So that's really important. I've heard of those stories. Interview multiple contractors when you're looking at it, and then the follow-up plan. Again, you can't just walk away. Just like I tell people, you build a $2 million house, you have to budget in some type of maintenance for that. Same thing with trees. When you plant them, when you maintain them, you have to have some level of budget. We do inventories on properties, mainly commercial properties, to establish budgets. And it's amazing how many people they don't know what the value of a tree is. It's tough to figure out the value. I always say it's priceless because of trees. But you have the way that we calculate it is you talked a little bit about how much water they take up, CO2. We know landscape's equivalent to about 15 to 20% of the value of your property. So start doing the math on that, and you realize how important trees are. So that's where we kind of work with the budget based on what the value of your trees are. I mean, I've got trees, some are $40,000, $50,000. It's not the removal of it, replanting, because you can't replace a 100-foot, 60-inch white oak. It's not possible. So how do you put a value on that? So we do that. We do a little bit of appraisals, but mainly we do it through an inventory plan. We're more on the maintenance side.
What makes a $40,000 or $50,000 tree?
What makes it?
Yeah, why is it 40 or 50,000?
It can be 100,000. It's species, it's size, it's location in the landscape. You got to take all these factors into consideration when you put a value on a tree. The canopy, how much shade does that provide? Does it provide shade to the house, or does it not? What's that do for your air conditioning bill? So there's a lot of factors in establishing the value of a tree. Lots of times they get into tree value when someone kills a tree. I think, the willow oaks. I think some Auburn fan killed an Alabama trees or something. I don't know what it was, but that's not the right thing to do, right? You can't replace those trees. So getting into the process. So what is the process? Why is the permit? Why was it established? Can you tell me why we now have a permit process? Thank you. To keep people from doing stupid things, right? So, is that a stupid thing? Yes. That's probably the result of the great-grandfather who did what happened on the left, you know, where they cleared it many years ago, and now we have to do this to fix it. Is that inexpensive? That's really expensive. We've had some properties on the Severn that have had to bring a California company in and drill into the side of the wall, side of the hill to keep the pool from falling out. And if we just kept our trees and our vegetation there, we would have been in a lot better shape. So the permit's probably, what is it? So you got to fill out a VMP. VMP is a vegetative management plan that basically has a list of what you want to do on the property, whether that kill poison ivy, whether that be prune trees, whether that be remove trees. So you got to fill that out. You fill it out, you can go with photos, take it into the, you can have the county meet you, or you can take it into the county with photos, and they'll give you an approval. They'll then tell you what trees need to be planted based on what your project is. The larger the project, the more the vegetation, the more trees they want to go back in. So that's basically the process to help prevent and protect our waters. Is it difficult or costly? No, it's not. It's not difficult, and it's not costly. It doesn't even cost anything to get a permit. But the permit needs to be a plan. It doesn't need to just be a permit to just cut, 50 trees on your waterfront. They won't allow that. So it's really important to understand that it's not costly, it's not difficult. Do the process. They'll give you some advice. There's certain advice that the county can't give you where a contractor or somebody that's in the professional side could give you advice. They're not going to be able to do that. They're not going to give you advice on who to use either, which makes sense. So we want to try to avoid this. I mean, that's just expensive. It's unnecessary. And sometimes it's necessary with the property, but I wouldn't want to have to deal with that. So steps for it, we have mitigation. So 3-to-1. 3-to-1 would be if you wanted to take down a healthy tree that didn't have a whole lot of justification for coming down. The important part of bringing an arborist or to bring someone on a professional side is we can kind of be the liaison between you and the county, so that, if you had a tree that needs to come down, the county comes out and they say, well, we've got a major cavity in here, we've done a tree risk assessment, I drilled the tree and we found that there's decay in there. They may convert that 3-to-1 to a 1-to-1, okay? But it's really important to understand mitigation. What is going to be the expense of trees that need to go down based on what you want to do with it? In many cases, it'll be 1-to-1. Sometimes a dead tree, there won't be any mitigation. They just need to make sure that you document it, that it's not a safe tree. Trees versus shrubs, that's negotiable. I think that it's important to understand that it's not just whatever they say. If you meet with somebody and you say, all right, I got 4 trees that need to come down so that I can have benefit to these other maple trees, or there's oaks, you have a reason, there's justification. They may drop that from a 3-to-1 to a 1-to-1 based on having a plan and someone saying, you know what, this is what you should do. They will adjust it. And maybe it doesn't make sense to plant. Maybe you don't have the space to plant 4 oaks that, it's not going to make sense. 4 oaks, 4 foot apart in the next 20 years doesn't make any sense. So maybe we put 1 oak and we put a bunch of shrubs underneath. So they're willing to do that. Violations, nobody wants to get into violations. I mean, I've heard of people that just want to write checks, but we don't want to get into that. They don't want to get in the reactive side. They want to be proactive, and you all should be proactive as well when dealing with your property and trees. So implementation, again, once you get the permits, obviously get the bad trees out, the dangerous trees, pruning. So I'm going to talk a lot about pruning because it's really important. I'm seeing some really bad pruning out there. Some may be done by you, some may be done by contractors, maybe some done by previous owners. But topping is not pruning. This is a really important one. To establish goals when you're an arborist, goals with pruning is really important. Do you prune trees just to prune them? You gotta have a reason. What's the point? Is it to take dead limbs out? Is it to establish a central leader so it doesn't split later on? Having a goal is really important. View is not a goal. Okay? If you want a view, that means you're not taking into consideration what the result of that tree is going to be. When I cut it, it's because I'm standing here and I want to see that water over there, I'm going to cut it. That's not having any consideration of what the tree is. That's just you wanting to get a view. What we do when we get into a pruning project is we have a conversation with the client. We say, hey, what's important to you. If it's just view, well, then maybe you need to hire somebody else. But if it is the trees in the view, then we can go in there and establish a goal for the tree. And guess what? The byproduct is view, but our goal is to reduce the tree, thin the tree out, establish, taking this limb. Instead of taking this limb off, maybe we take that limb off, and oh, by the way, you can now see the water from your kitchen without destroying the tree or without destroying the entire view. Because once you top trees, there's no going back. Once they're topped, then you end up having to continue to top them all the time. I mean, we've seen that. I know I don't know how they did it, but I think Sherwood Forest has that whole right to continue to top. It's a lot of maintenance, a lot of work, and a lot of expense. If you let them grow up, there's nothing better than having a beautiful established canopy, a mid-story with some trees, and the view. But once you get in the topping game, it's for life. Unless you're great-great-grandkids, you want to let them eventually stop doing that and letting them grow up and see underneath them. So I got some pictures of what a forest should look like, where you can have both, you can have view, you can have those things. But once you get into topping, it's an endless pattern. And that's not something that the county will sign off on for a BMP, is to go ahead and top all your trees. So again, getting into it, it's not a goal, it's a byproduct. We're big into the tree care stuff, the cables, the lightning protection. Has anybody had a tree struck by lightning? Did it die right away, or was it a slow, painful death? Slow, painful, yeah. What happened
No,
here?
I have a tree with your lightning system on it.
There you go.
But that's a typo, of course.
Oh, sorry, yeah. Yeah, lightning protection. I've got, here's a wire from one of them. So if you haven't seen it, it's basically just a 1/4-inch copper wire. We run to the top of the tree, we ground it. The big thing with this is it's kind of the reverse lottery ticket. The worst thing is having your tree struck by lightning. The chance of it, it's going to depend on the height of the tree. The number one tree struck by lightning is, which tree would you guess? What's the highest tree around? Tulip poplar, number one tree struck. What's second? Oak. Tall, right, height. So once they get struck, sometimes they blow apart, and we've had them cause fires. If you've got a tulip poplar within 10 feet of your house, I would highly recommend a lightning protection system. We can't guarantee it's going to protect the house, but if you're lightning and are you going to hit a copper wire at 120 feet, or are you going to hit your house at 60 feet? I'd go to the copper wire personally. So we do a lot of that, and again, a lot of it is just the insurance on the removal of the tree. Who do you think? What's the most expensive tree we've ever removed? Who can give me a number?
10,000.
10,000. That's the deposit.
That's the deposit.
I had a $36,000 tree removal. So the crane was $22,000. We had to reach over 185 feet over top of the house to get it out of there. But it was over a pool, and a limb fell and almost killed their grandkids. So what's the price of your grandkids? Much more than $36,000. So, but prevention's where it's at. If you've got a big, huge tree in the backyard and it costs $1,500 to put a lightning system in it, and if it gets struck by lightning and it costs you $12,000 remove, is that a good investment or a bad investment? I hate removing trees. I hate spending people's money, spending $15,000 to get what? At the end of the day, you have nothing. You have a tree that's not there anymore. So invest in lightning protection. It's an insurance policy on the tree. At least I can eliminate lightning. Could it fall over? Certainly. But depending on the location and where it's at, it's really important. Proactive cables are something that, again, we talked about young trees. If we could prune trees properly, we would have to do a lot of cabling and bracing. But at the end of the day, cables work. They really hold trees together. We do hundreds and hundreds of cables a year, and they really do hold trees together. And then again, implementation, getting into invasive management, planting, and then always, again, I keep hitting the highlight, follow-up maintenance. You gotta follow up, you can't just walk away. So why do they fall? Why do trees fall? That's a worst case scenario. A, it's very difficult to get out of there and we lose the tree. So basically, it's the load exceeds the material strength of the plant part. So leans, soil moisture, soil composition, species all play a part. But a lot of it's load, it's a fulcrum. If you have weight, that's why I talk about dead trees. I don't get too worried about dead trees because they don't typically fall over because they don't have a load. I was in charge of the cleanup at the University of Maryland 10, 15 years ago when they had a tornado go through. You know the only thing that was standing after the tornado was dead trees. Because a tornado comes through and it takes the leaves, and that's a load. It's like a sail. If you put a sail up in a sailboat, that boat's going to move. If you don't put the sail up, the wind's going to move through it. So dead trees typically don't fall, they eventually fall over, but they don't really uproot and take a whole lot of soil with them. And that's a big problem, is the soil exposure. That's tough to fix. So stem failures, again, this is where we see most of the problems that a lot of people don't see. Codominant leaders with maple trees. Again, this is not taking care of trees while they're young. Over on the right-hand side, again, they split apart. So these are the biggest failures that we see. Trees don't want to fall over or fall apart. The reason why people ask, well, in Mother Nature, these trees don't happen. Well, where does Mother Nature grow trees?
In the woods.
In the woods. Is there all ample sunlight in the world for a tree to grow? No. So what do we do with our trees? We plant them in the front yard, and they have all in the world for the sunlight to grow. So they get greedy. They start putting up these side limbs, and they end up splitting apart. In the woods, that's why they have a single stem. They're reaching out for the sunlight to try and get to the forest, the top of the forest. So they establish a strong leader. So yes, Mother Nature, we fight Mother Nature by doing silly things. I mean, I love a tree in the front yard, but that's what happens. But that's how we establish this codominant leader. So again, dead trees versus rich trees. I don't mind dead trees on properties. They're great for woodpeckers, great for wildlife, as long as when they fall, they don't hit anything, hit a neighbor, hit a fence. Or maybe you want to hit a neighbor, I don't know. But so common defects leading to failures, again, dense crowns. You can see that tree had all the amount. They get greedy. The little trees are greedy. Over here on the right-hand side, tree failure. Why do you think that tree failed? What's that? Yeah, see that sidewalk that went in? That probably wasn't good for the trees. Right, so wherever you have structures that go in around trees, that becomes a defect. Defect combined with a dense crown is the biggest concern I've got. As an arborist, where I see tree fails is where we have it. We have an overloaded crown and a very small root system, or a damaged root system, and that's where trees come over. They don't want to fall over any more than you want them to fall over. Again, overloaded. You can see that that lead over there. Now we can get up there by pruning. What would be a way that we could prune this and save the tree? Remove the whole lead? You could. It's surgery. Would you rather remove your finger or your arm? Just do a little bit of pruning. You could do some reduction pruning on the left-hand side, but you can see how that has a lot of lean that way. Some lean is good. Phototropism. Anybody tell me what phototropism is? See, reaching out to light. That's a slow process. The tree will actually expand and put growth out to expand out for sunlight. But if it's a tree that's standing this way and the next day is like this, that's a bad lean. That means we got a root failure or some type of soil issue going on there. So it's important to understand the difference between phototropism. So, live crown ratio. So which picture has a higher probability of failure? The one on the right or the one on the left? Right or left? We got right, we got left. What do you think? You would say left? Why do you say left?
As you were saying, there's so much foliage with the wind.
Yeah, but look how it's evenly dispersed throughout the crown.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so dampering. See how this has all the way to the ground?
Okay.
So when the wind hits this, it evenly disperses it. What about here? No, that's coming over. I mean, that's a fulcrum. So that puts all that pressure in right around here, whereas this, it dampers it. So also pruning is really important when you hire a contractor. Is more better or less? Do you pay by the amount of brush that goes through the chipper, or should you pay by the quality of the work in the tree? Would you rather your heart surgeon take more or just the right amount? That's right. I see a lot of overthinning, and overthinning is lion's tailing. If you see a lion's tail, it's all thin in the middle and bushy on the end. That's what they do. You'll go in and you'll strip out the middle, and you say, "Wow, I got a great pruning job." Well, when the tree fails and falls over, that dampering is really important inside these limbs to have a dampering effect. So don't strip out in the middle. Don't top. Don't strip out. Find something right in the middle. So again, the right tool for the job. When's the best time to prune?
Winter. Depends on the.
Depends. Fall. There's only about one or two trees that really matters because of an insect. There's an elm tree that you wouldn't prune due to this borer that comes in. Everything else is, what in my opinion, is when you have the budget or before the tree falls apart, right? So it's really important that how you do the cutting, not when you do the cutting, and the quality of the work. There is some with flowering. Obviously, if you want a flowering tree, like I wouldn't prune a cherry tree right now because you're going to remove the flower buds. But from the health standpoint, it doesn't really matter. Again, how to make a cut. If you just go and make the cut on the left-hand side here, you can see that rips. I see that a lot. Whereas if you cut off the end and you leave the stub, then you lightly cut here, then you can make a finished cut. So again, when you cut here and you have all the weight out there, guess what happens? It rips down. So how you make the cut is really, really important, and why you make the cut. Again, that's terrible. I don't like seeing that. That's just an open wound right there. So in this area is the branch collar. It has chemicals. The chemicals help healing. So you can see over here maybe some healing here. But if you do this, that's like ripping your arm off. You don't want that. Again, thinning cuts. We're gonna get more into pruning, making proper cuts. Lateral. So again, we have topping and then we have crown reduction. There's a big difference between the two. So the difference between the two is topping. If you get my laser, topping means I want to see the view up here, so I'm going to cut there. I'm going to make a cut anywhere to get the height I want. When we do a lateral cut or a crown reduction, see how we're cutting back to the lateral? We're actually making a cut there, not just picking it based on where it is, but scientifically we want to cut back to that. I don't like doing a lot of this, but it is doable. Typically I do this more on lateral limbs to help reduce the overall size of the tree. There's a reduction cut. A lot of this happens also in storm damage. So you get ice damage, ice break, but you can get some level of view or try and get some sunlight in by doing this without hurting the tree. But just come in here and just cutting here and here, what happens is chemically is it sends branches back out called sucker branches. And I'll show you some pictures of what that looks like. Again, an upright leader, having removed that. Emphasis. So why do we want to emphasize structural pruning on these rather than these? We talked about it earlier. These faster growing trees, these are trees that are, you got maples, beech, oaks are last. So the tulip tree in there is on that one. They tend to grow so fast it shouldn't be a problem, but maples are the ones that really split apart very easily. And so do lindens. So there you go. Classic hat rack. I'm really glad I don't see a lot of this right now. If you go to Pennsylvania, if you're driven to Pennsylvania, you see a lot of this. And this is just poor education, to be honest with you. You shouldn't be topping trees. If you need to keep a tree at that height, you just remove and start over. Again, trees underneath power lines, should you be choosing that tree? That comes into the planting process. Don't plant the fast-growing tree underneath power lines, because then you're going to complain to BGE because they're going on the power lines. Right? If they want their business, they're going to have to do it. So this is a perfect example of, there's no lateral cuts there. That just means cut, let it grow up. Is that good for view or bad for view? That's bad. I mean, that's like putting up a wall of vegetation instead of going up there and properly thinning or reducing. So, and then decay moves in here, and then 10 years later, this limb falls out of the tree and lands on your car, and you wonder why. Because 10 years ago, you just did a topping cut. Trees aren't made to be pruned like that. Again, following the best management practices. We all have rules and regulations, just like your doctor would be. We have a management practices. They're constantly changing and upgrading that so that we follow those. Again, you can see younger trees. We can be more aggressive pruning with younger trees to remove that leader, and you can see it's already healed over. An older tree, you make a big cut like that, it's not going to heal over. So, you know, how you prune trees and working on young trees is really important. This is what we're trying to prevent. This is that tree that grew up that had a double leader. Decay came in, the wind event came and broke the tree. A way to solve that would have been a cable. The cable would have helped that, but we want to try and prevent having to put cables and hardware in trees. Start young. Here's a good example of, this is out of a research lab. See how this is out? Everybody see these codominants? See how he reestablished the center leader? Not too difficult. Get back and get the center leader. The younger the tree, the more you got to prune. Again, getting more into the thinning and pruning. So here's a good example of what a properly pruned tree looks like. Did we strip out all the middle? No, a little bit of thinning in there, but we brought out the lower branches. So you can see a big difference. Take the branches out, we're pretty good there. So just some examples of there's a Vista prune. Again, we didn't just strip all the lower out, right? We kept some lower, kept some higher, and we're able to establish view without cutting trees down. A good Vista prune. Invasive species. I'll kind of rip through these. You got to identify them, you got to eradicate them, you got to replant, and you got to have maintenance. Mile a minute vine, bad. That's terrible. That's good. You guys driven down 95 down into the south, well, guess what's coming north? Kudzu. That's not good for your forest. So again, we talked a little bit about proactive insect disease management, growth regulation. There's your lightning protection right here. Everybody see it? Running up the tree. Here's a cable, support cable holding the tree together. Healthy buffers. They have defined, established, and diverse overstory. We have an overstory, We have a mid-story and we have an understory. Those are the best possible buffers because the overstory is providing shade to keep the invasives out. It's also holding this big soil in, so the big trees hold the big soil in. The understory or mid-story trees is the next phase if you lose a big tree. And then the ground cover, when you get rain in the winter, will help prevent having the small erosion. So the rain can cause small erosion, which we've had a lot of. So you have to have the best thing is to have all three of those established. Again, great resources for plant materials, extension service, local garden centers, homestead production to get your native trees, really important. Insect disease issues, this is stuff that we're seeing out there on a regular basis. I got some good photos for you. Most of the diseases and insects are host specific. So this is leaf spot on mountain laurel. I've seen a ton of that with all the rain. It's really important that we clean up the leaves as they drop, get those cleaned up out of there. If you want to treat, we have great programs in terms of treating to help the leaf spot. With diseases, you have to be proactive. You got to start now before that leaf spot gets on the disease. We can't wipe the disease off the plant, but the new growth we can protect. So being proactive with diseases is really, really important. This is Phytophthora canker on a beech tree, but they're all over. You've got chestnut oaks, red oaks. The worst thing for trees is extreme drought followed by extreme rain. That really brings a lot of diseases. This Phytophthora canker, treatable, but you got to catch it early. Here's dogwood anthracnose. Again, a major problem with this last year's rain. We really need some dry weather. So here's a great buffer. I mean, that's what we're looking for. We've got an overstory, we've got understory. Do you see grass or turf in there?
No.
No, they don't mix. That's a really good forest. Again, some large trees, some smaller trees, and ground cover. That is a great, great buffer. That's the kind of buffers we need along the several. There we go. Any more questions?
Yeah, you were talking about invasive species earlier, and you came out of that weed type of thing. I had a real issue with the tree to heaven. And it came in and I had a bunch of silver bells in there, and all of a sudden in about a year and a half, all the silver bells were gone, and I had 119 trees to heaven, and they're going right mad.
Yep.
Which I had to take out. There's ways to do it. But is it a real problem in this area?
Tree habit? Yeah, absolutely. Yes, it's a calorie pear is another one. You see them all along 97. It's beautiful, the flower. But again, when you have monoculture, one of the same type of tree, you're not going to have diversity. And if a problem comes in, it's going to wipe that tree out, and it's going to wipe out your native trees that are underneath it.
The Forest Service says that the roots will actually go out and kill the native trees.
They can do that, and they'll pop up and sprout up. When you cut them down, I know herbicides are a big hot topic right now. I understand that, but if used properly, in that case, you can cut them, apply it right to the stump, and that will take care of it instead of spraying it in the air everywhere. Mix it at the right rate, but in honesty, with invasive species, unless you're going to go in there and literally grub out every root, you got to use some level of herbicides. It's just the reality of trying to control that. I know people don't want to. They are coming up with some better products out there, but it's a big challenge.
One that will take everything out in the invasive species and not touch anything.
What's that?
There's a herbicide
Yeah.
that take care of only that.
Yep. They have very, very targeted. It's really important that, again, you get targeted. So you guys know there's different varieties of herbicides. It's really important to understand, don't use the extended controls that are out there. The Roundup extended controls, the Weed Be Gone extended control. They have a product in there that actually, if you go on your driveway and you spray this stuff on your driveway, it will leach down and kill the roots that are underneath there from trees. Your normal, regular Roundup, Roundup Pro, mix it the right rate. I emphasize that. More is not better in this case, okay? Mix it, and again, it has to go through the leaves. So that way you can be very targeted with Roundup. It's not going to move through the bark. There are some Garlon and some other products that will move through the bark and kill trees. So use them sparingly, but you got to use them in some cases. There's no other way around it. You got a good tree here and a bad tree here. The herbicide can kill the bad tree, let the new tree grow up.
One last question.
I have a locust tree that seems to be sprouting up everywhere well, maybe within 25 feet.
It's all cut. It's root sprout. So a locust is another tree that will root sprout, and it'll, again, if you kill that, those sprouts that come up with an herbicide, it will kill the tree. It'll move through it. Just keep clipping them. Yeah, that's all you can do. So if I know we got to go, I went probably a little bit over, but thank you for your time. I hope you learned something, take something with you, and keep practicing taking care of the severn. You know, it's all my kids' futures in the bay and being able to enjoy the waterfront. So keep up the good work.
Slide up with the trees on it, the tree bed, people
Yes. I'll put that up. Good. Thank you.